All right, Two Planker Podcast. We got special guest Nick Martini on today. And Nick, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, man, no doubt. Stoked to chat with you guys. How's everything going?
Yeah, this is great to have you. We're on a time crunch, so I wanted to do. I listened to everything you've done so far, all the interviews, and we know the story of like the injuries leading into the video. So I wanted to do a very focused episode for the skiers that listen. There's a lot of crews right now that are reaching their mid to late 20s, and they're like, "Hey, we need to pack this up." Like, what are we doing here? We're not making any money. We're making ski movies every year. We're getting beat to
Been
shit.
there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you've done that transition, and these guys have all these like awesome experience. So I want to kind of, at least for the first part of this, like just talk about making that transition and any like, we could start with your story and how you guys made
Yeah.
that transition. But I think that's like the most value we could add to the community with this conversation.
Yeah, man, I love that, and yeah, it is relevant for almost anybody who's like a skier, and there is like the 1% of the 1% who end up like being a Scott Schmidt or I'm trying to think, like a Davenport who are still skiing professionally on Red Bull when they're 48 years old. But for the vast majority of humans, whether you're a skier or a ski filmer or like anybody who just loves skiing has like been part of that community, like you're saying, like through your teens and your early 20s, ultimately at some point you're sort of looking where to go next. And there are opportunities in the ski industry that become a natural transition for some, but there ultimately like, aren't enough of those sort of roles and positions for everybody. Like I think I've seen a lot of my close friends sort of end up becoming team managers or something for the brands. And also, it's just really tough, dude. Like, if you want to say in the ski industry professionally, outside of like filming and skiing, to make like a good living, there aren't a ton of those jobs in skiing, and some of those are the dream jobs. Like I think we all know those people who work for brands who like found some way to be sustainable in the industry and make a good living, and like there's always those opportunities, but um for someone like myself, like I was trying to explore what was next, and you start thinking like, what does that look like? What are the possibilities? I think I would imagine I'm probably not alone that like there's some innate things a lot of us loved that we all wanted to try to maintain as we moved on into some other professional realm. Like for me, that was filmmaking, which I was really passionate about. And I know there's so many other people in skiing who are exposed to like creative pursuits, whether that's art, photography, film. Like skiing is one of those sports that isn't really like a team sport in the sense that like you guys get together with your high school on the weekend, or for most people it isn't. It's like a sport like skateboarding or surfing where like the exploits aren't really held at like your state championship most of the time. It's usually like filming shit with your friends for years and years on end. It's like a big community around the internet and showing fucking cool clips and photos. So like for better or for worse, almost everybody in like the core ski community is really exposed to like film and photography at some point, like how most professional skateboarders or surfers are, just because it's such like an innate part of how our sport is shared and captured and enjoyed. Um, so for people who are exposed to those like creative exploits through skiing, it's a really good opportunity to lean into that skill set, whether it's a skill set or something you're just passionate about. Because that world is so vast. And obviously, like we have a particular path I went down, which is one of many, which I can talk a little bit about. But
Mm.
outside of myself, I can't even count how many people I know from skiing in particular who ultimately went on to have really interesting, successful careers in visual arts. Whether that's people like Chris Benchetler who are painting art not only for skis but just as like an incredible artist, or someone like Charlie Owens who's in the Step Crew who now is doing multi-million dollar film projects all over the world as a cinematographer. Michael Clark, who came before me, he was like the first successful commercial director I knew who came from the ski industry. So many documentary directors too, like the Max Lowe's and the Jimmy Chins and all these people who like you see winning Oscars who sort of all came from like the outdoor adventure world. So I'm definitely one of many who have like found some way to find some sustainable career that doesn't suck to do either. Like I love what I do every day. And it really was born from what we were doing in the ski industry is making films with our friends. And been fortunate enough now, like sort of like 10 years since the knees gave out, I'm still making films with my friends. Like, and that's what I'm doing for work. So like, as much as it's a massive paradigm shift in the way I work, the people around me, like the clients and shit like that, a lot of the people around me, like are the same people I worked with in the ski world. Like the at Stepped now, the two founding partners are still my brother Alex Martini and Cam Riley, who like I spent 15 years jumping off fucking buildings with and like killing ourselves. So like we've been lucky enough to figure out a way to continue to work with friends. And I think the two pillars that made that possible, which I think people should like think about, is like one, something you're passionate about, which for me in particular, that was like filmmaking rather than like photography or art, like some of these other people I'm talking about. Um, and looking for adjacent industries or like places that you can like sort of function in a similar way, but maybe are on like a bigger scale. Whereas like the resources surrounding like the NFL are a little bit different than like the X Games, for instance, inherently. So it's like I like filming sports, I like filming action, and if I applied this to some of these other adjacent spaces, I could probably do a very similar thing, but do it at a much higher level as a professional career. And then the other biggest thing I gained from skiing that allowed me to transition were just the relationships. I think it's so rare that a bunch of like I mean, at the time, we were literally like degenerate teenage kids, and we knew like high level marketing people at these huge global companies. Like we befriended the creative leadership at the North Face and at Under Armour and at Red Bull and at Rockstar Energy. And then you walk away from the ski industry at some point, and those relationships are invaluable. And the other people who are trying to get that work, who just graduated college or some shit, they have no starting point whatsoever. They're starting from scratch as like an intern, and they can't walk in and be like, even like a brand like Solomon that we may know from skiing is a massive global running company. So like I'm currently working for Solomon right now with the same people that were my team managers 15 years ago. So it's like I think a lot of people take it for granted in the ski industry of how valuable of relationships you get to make along the way. And that's what's so special about the sport. It's like maybe a little bit smaller than like the big NFL NBA shit, but at the same time, the same brands are involved and the same people at those brands are working across a bunch of different verticals in sports. So like whether you're a skier who has personal sponsorships or whether you're a content creator who's getting hired by these brands or whether you're somebody in the crew who just becomes friends with people at these big brands through skiing at these events, at the contests, at film premieres, you really got to value those relationships and keep them close and like maintain them as well. And it takes work to maintain those relationships. If you disappear for a year or two, people just sort of like forget who you are. So like it's not a passive thing. You got to like proactively nurture those relationships, knowing that like in 5 years, that person may be your lifeline to have like your dream job. And maybe it's not even in skiing. Maybe it's like they're your lifeline to go get a job at Under Armour in the NFL program. I literally know people this happened to in skiing who got the craziest fucking jobs ever because of the people they met in skiing, and they just kept the relationships tight. And 5 years later, they're working for some crazy NBA team or something that feels like it's not related to skiing in any way, but is the same exact people who connected the dots for them. So for me, it was like the biggest takeaway that had value in that transition was the relationships and then just sort of like the passion for whatever you're doing, and that could be making ski movies or a professional skier who has a passion for like just fucking going to get it. Like I think a lot of people are like professional or pseudo professional athletes inherently are like really driven and motivated. Or if you're going to go shovel the rooftop of a building for 12 hours in the middle of the night, you're probably a hustler, like in general, and you're probably going to do okay out there in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so funny that you said that because I think that you look at these ski crews and a lot of these times, or just generally speaking, some of these guys don't go to college. They get a chip on their shoulder, like, oh, like I don't know what I'm doing with my life. But it's like you spent the past 4 years instead of sitting in a classroom, like you're in the field shooting, making pitch decks, working with sponsors. Like I think that being a ski crew is probably more valuable life experience than you would get like going to Emerson College and like doing all like the formal classes. Like
I
I
couldn't
don't.
agree
That's how
more.
I
You're
see it.
like,
I forget what you went to school for, but like you went to school
yeah.
and we're filming on the side.
Yeah, I went to Boulder and I ended up going to business school, but like I can't say I had like that much tangible output that like altered my career because of like my marketing degree at Boulder. Like
Yeah.
we were at Boulder, like sort of partying and hanging out, and the school thing was fun and whatever, but it wasn't like a big differentiator really in my career. I think to your point, you get exposed like yeah at a very young age. I remember as a teenager, we were like 16, our first step to film, we got international distribution for, and I was doing like international contracts when I was like 16, probably not even skiing, like film distribution, which I had no fucking business doing. And like I remember we got ourselves in some bad positions, but just like the fact that you're having conversations like that, or like
Mhm.
you're saying that you're like building pitch materials and actually pitching them to brands and like creating content relationships and getting paid and invoicing people and like just getting this crazy invaluable real life experience that to your point the majority of your friends sitting in a classroom getting a lit degree or communications degree really like aren't getting any tangible experience. They're still going to have to go through the first couple of years of that career. They're going to need to learn all that shit that you probably learned organically just by like playing adult a little bit as you're like trying to hustle and make some money and like work with brands and like create art. It is sort of invaluable that those skill sets you're gaining, whether you realize you're gaining them or not, you are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
So okay, so building upon that premise, these guys have skills that they might not even realize like how important they are for like the actual commercial business world. So, and you guys were operating at a really high level as like a ski crew and making these
Yeah.
movies. So you guys were already taking it serious to a degree that is abnormal for ski crews. So how did you like what were the first steps of taking it outside of skiing and like making content where skiing isn't involved at all?
Yeah. It was really baby steps, man. I think myself and Cam and Alex and a couple of like our core collaborators from the Step crew, where there's like Charlie Clayton, like Sean, like everybody, we got excited about filmmaking in general. So like in the summers in Boulder, I remember we'd be like cutting the ski film and we just started like making other shit. And no one was paying us to or asking us to. We just started doing some like creative film projects on the side that inherently were like adjacent to our skill set, but it's like, let's do some skate shit. Let's do some like lifestyle and fashion stuff purely just for fun. And I think as soon as we started like sharing some of that work out in the world, the people we knew from the ski world started realizing we had a skill set that could be applicable to other places. So like it was really taking a leap of faith and just like doing some speculative fun shit that then all of a sudden, someone at Under Armour was like, well, shit, would you guys want to do some basketball stuff? Remember we did a Steph Curry shoot, super small thing right when he signed with them about like a little shoe release. And it went well. And then we'd go show that to our homies at North Face. We're like, well, shit, maybe you guys could do this other type of work, And
Mm.
it's not something that happened overnight. Like we paid our dues by doing a lot of small, trivial stuff for brands, whether it's favors or low budget, of like, hey, even if you don't have the money to do it, can we help you guys do like a little product thing about the Olympic ski line where like all of a sudden it isn't ski action. It's like interviews with executives talking about products. And then all of a sudden that can get you your next thing to do like
Mhm.
executive interviews about non-ski products. And then you can get rid of the interviews and do a commercial or whatever. But I think for me, it was being really open to do work, even if it was unpaid, if it got us the opportunity to tiptoe into a new space that we hadn't been yet. And ultimately, anyone who's filming ski movies is good enough with cameras that they could probably create any type of content, but no one's going to let you create the other type of content until they've seen that you can do it. So at some point, you got to sort of go and start making some shit just for fun that isn't ski related to showcase that skill set. Build your own website, put that shit up there next to the ski stuff. And then if some friend's brand wants you to do something, all of a sudden they can go and see that you are able to do that. You can
Yeah.
do stuff other than just shooting a fucking handrail. And if you own a camera, it's not a huge investment of your time and effort to do some stuff like that. And I'd encourage you also, I've seen so many people have success looking to your left and right at friends who are starting small businesses. Like my buddy's doing his little coffee company. My homie has a t-shirt company, like as you're getting out of college, and go shoot shit for them for free and slap the brand logos on it and put it on your website. And it looks like there's a bunch of companies paying you to do stuff, which ultimately they aren't, but no one gives a shit if they don't know who you are. They just go to your website and see cool work with brands. And they sort of know you have that skill set, you've had the experience, and they don't need to know that it was unpaid and that it's your buddy from down the hall's startup. Like no one gives a shit. So that's what I would encourage, at least on the film side. And I think the photo is very adjacent to that as well. Just
Mm.
like taking your time to shoot stuff outside of skiing, showcase it on your Instagram or your website so that people in your community are like, oh shit, that's like this ski filmer, but he's actually doing like other stuff that I could utilize. And you'll end up getting those phone calls organically at some point.
Yeah, totally. And it's so funny. Like I agree so much with what you're saying because I feel like I followed. I don't shoot in TV, but I work in TV and like on the back end, and so much of it's the same, building on previous experience. And like my mantra been my whole like my entire career is do the first one for free. Like I
Yep.
don't care if I'm getting paid if I'm trying to level up. Like I will literally do it for free. Just you got to be around the hoop and you just got to be there. Like to share a small anecdote, like I'm never afraid to work as a PA. Like I've done so much work above being a PA, but if you're trying to move into a new company or a new group, like just be a production assistant for a day and like show up to one shoot or like we were covering basketball in Springfield and I only got hired for a day and then I was talking to the guy in charge. I'm like, "Dude, I'm trying to do what you do. Can I come in tomorrow unpaid and just shadow you for the day?" He's like, "Hell yeah." Like, "Why not?" And it's like, "Just do the first one for free. Just get
And
in
then
there
you
and
make
just
homies with the guy, and then he calls you the next week for a paid gig.
yeah, exactly." And
Yeah,
that's
man.
exactly how it goes.
We're,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
we're
go ahead.
still doing that shit to this day, man. Like, there's
Yeah.
certain types of work that we have filmmakers where they're like, really want to do car commercials. Turns out no one's going to hire you to do a car commercial until you've done one. So I can't count how many free car commercials we've done like over the years, trying to get that shit on filmmakers' reels. And then 10 years later, some of those guys like really successful automotive directors, but like you sort of got to take that leap of faith and invest in yourself a little bit.
Well, yeah, that's like kind of how I see it. It's an investment. You're not making any money, and you don't see the return immediately, but it's like you're
Yeah,
planting a seed for that future success.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So that's so funny because that actually checks off something I wanted to ask you about. Um, So yeah, at first making money isn't important. Just get the experience. What do you think about? Because I think this for like for photographers. If you know someone who's trying to be a photographer, like most of the time they'll have their camera or a camera with them. Do you think that translates into like the film world at all? Like just always having a video
Yeah.
camera with you and just always kind of shooting?
Yeah, I think so. It really depends what type of work you're doing. Like, if you're like really passionate about real people, documentary storytelling, yeah, you got to have your camera glued to your hip. I would say, like, if you're more interested in narrative filmmaking or commercial filmmaking, that's a little bit more like curated and stylized. I think a lot of it actually comes down to the ideation, apart from having a camera in your hands, like coming up with a concept you really think is cool. And that most of the time is happening in your head or on paper.
Hmm.
And you dedicate a little bit of extra time to that process, and then you go shoot, you're going to be amazed at how much more elevated the final product will be. But then there's other people. I think photography, for instance, like I have a bunch of friends who have become sort of like successful like documentary street photographers that like that camera's on them 24 hours a fucking day, always. Whereas like other sort of more conceptual, stylized people are spending a lot of time concepting, and we got a lot of powerful free tools for that shit too in the world of AI now. You can dream up some really cool shit very easily with no money involved. So it's a blessing for everybody.
Yeah. So changing gears.
Yeah.
I listened to an interview you did, and you talked about how when you got injured, you really started playing around with cameras and like manipulating images. Do you think, like in your field, there's like a certain technical abilities or certain technical knowledge that you need to have to be successful? Like, I mean, you should continually learn in a field like you're in, but do you think that there's some bare bones stuff that's like you gotta have it locked in if you want to make it
Yeah.
even at all?
It's a double-edged sword, man. Like I'm a firm believer of like sort of the fake it till you make it, learn as you go type of mentality. Like I think especially in filmmaking, there's like this school of thought that's like you got to go to 4 years of film school and then pay your dues on film sets and climb up the ladder. Like we didn't do any of that shit. We just sort of like taught ourselves as we went, and it ended up working out. So like I think that's a testament that you can do it both ways. I will say um, being self-aware that you don't know everything is always very smart. I think we made some really cool shit in our ski days, and was pretty confident around like cameras and some basic lighting. Over the next 10 years, I learned I really had no fucking idea what I was doing. Not to say we didn't still make cool stuff, but like you start to learn technical skills that allow you to elevate the look and feel of things very quickly. So I'd encourage everybody to like dedicate the time to try to master your craft the best you can. I still go to school once a year for different film programs, like all the time, like whether it's a 2 day lighting course or like a seminar on new AI tech that people are using for VFX, or like you sort of always got to hone your craft because you just got to imagine if you're not doing it, the guy next to you is, and he's going to be better than you. So
Mhm.
like I have two schools of thought, I guess, but like the technical shit can be super helpful, but it is definitely not needed to like break into the film industry. It's not like you got to go to film school or any of this shit. Same with photography. I know so many famous photographers who are self-taught who are incredibly talented, but again, the technical knowledge isn't going to hurt your progression. It's only going to help. So if you have the access or the resources to get trained technically, it's never a bad idea, but it's definitely not a must. And from my perspective, you
Yeah.
know,
Do you think like, and again, this is a vague, like, not, I haven't given this question too much
yeah.
thought, but like, do you think that people should learn to be versatile and learn to shoot a lot of different styles, or should they focus on like developing their style and then kind of trying to monetize like their way of shooting things?
Yeah, I would say in the beginning, do as much shit as possible because you might discover something you didn't know about yourself. Like I'd say in the early days, shoot as much different shit as you can, and maybe you find out that like, fuck, dude, I really like shooting food. Or like I know people have gotten these weird niche like things, or they're super stylized. Like that comes with time. And I think if you decide in the early days of your career that this is your thing, that might be a little short-sighted. I'm not saying that like that hasn't worked for certain people, but I'm all for like experimenting with as much stuff as possible. And still, even like if you're doing this professionally now for a while, we're still trying new shit every day to try to figure out like how we can evolve, how we can change over time. And some shit sticks. Like some people got their niche and they just run with it. But I'd say let that come over time. In the early days, just do everything. Yeah, as much as you can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Um, all right, let's hop over to this. I'm just trying to like get as much value for these guys as possible because it's like
Yeah.
I don't want to see them just abandon their dreams because
Yeah.
it's a difficult waters to
Yeah.
navigate. And yeah, you just got so much great insight. So so the way I view jobs, again, this is changing gears. Most jobs come down to what bullshit you're willing to put up with and what bullshit you're good at putting up with. So like for what you do, like what bullshit do you put up with on a daily basis? Because even a dream job at the end of the day is still work where you're still doing stuff that's like, damn, this. I mean, I'm not saying like you don't have to say that this stuff sucks, but it is difficult work. Like, so what are some of those things that you deal with in your role?
I would say in any creative field, the biggest bullshit you're ever going to deal with is people management, and particularly the people who are paying you for whatever that work is. Ultimately, if you're going to be sustainable, you got to convince the people you're working for to like you and that you're doing a good job. And a lot of the times, some people are amazing to work for. A lot of people inherently are a bit of assholes or have conflicting opinions, and navigating those conversations delicately, I've learned over 10 years, is the biggest key to success. Because ultimately, if someone's paying you, they have some set of expectations. You don't really truly understand what those are, even if they've communicated them to. And it's very easy in our world for people to get frustrated, to feel like they're shortchanged, to not understand your process. And I've just realized that communicating and facing that stuff head on is the best way to get someone excited to keep working with you. And ultimately, like if people come back and they're going to be the ones who help grow your career. The other thought on your comment is like, I think a lot of people have the internet's bred this perception that certain people just do really cool shit. Like people tell me that all the time. Like, dude, look at Steps Up. You guys get the coolest work. Like all these projects look so dope. What they don't realize is that we show people about 30% of what we do. And a lot of the 70% of the other shit is like the stuff that's not really that fun and not really that creative. And like you gotta also just like pay the bills at some point and like keep the machine running. One thing we say a lot here is like there's one for the meal and one for the real, which is like sometimes you got to do the jobs that are just for the meal and you're not going to show them to anybody. And it's not a big deal. And if the client needs some informational interview done for some stakeholders, like that's great for them. And the stakeholders are going to love it. Are you proud of that work? Are you excited to go shoot that 4 hour interview on a Sunday? No. But like sometimes you got to do that shit. And earlier on, in your career, you're probably gonna do a lot more of that shit than the cool shit. And as long as you're comfortable with that, knowing that there's like an ends to the means, it should be palatable. And I think you got to look at it like even those jobs you're not excited about or the people you got to deal with that aren't great, try to find something from each of those projects that'll help get you to the next stage. So like we all the time did these like sort of boring corporate videos that were 10 minutes long. And we would just take our 4 or 5 favorite shots and make a 30-second cut down of it, put the brand logo at the end that looked pretty slick and cool. And like maybe the content you delivered to the client is going to put everyone to sleep. And that's just what they wanted for their purpose. But ultimately, you walked away with something that can go on your website or at least help get you that next job when you show the little thing you pulled out of it that you're proud of. So we talk to filmmakers about it all the time. It's like, if you're doing a project that you're not creatively psyched about, is there something you can get from it? Is there that one image that might help broaden your portfolio a little bit? Is there like a couple shots you can pull out and do a 15-second cut that you think visually is pretty fucking cool, or like that you think is more in line with the type of work you want to get? And as long as you try to like optimize those projects to get something out of it, it's going to allow you to get the better thing next time. And then you just keep climbing that ladder, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, it seems like you keep on referencing like the reel and the portfolio and the website. Like how important is that for like an aspirational filmmaker? Is it like
I
collecting all
think
the
it's,
content?
especially in the early days, it's everything. Like until you've built those high level personal relationships, we move so fast now. Like I probably look at, I don't know, 50 to 100 photographers every 3 to whether they're reaching out or we're reviewing for projects. And I would love to say I can like go read their LinkedIn and their history or whatever, but realistically, you're glancing quickly at like their Instagram page or their website, and like it's not great, but that is how people are perceiving you. So especially if you're trying to get in front of people, like painting that image of where you want to go is very important. And it's like if you are crushing it and making ski films and everybody knows you make ski films and you don't want to make ski films anymore and you want to do something else, you probably don't need all the ski films on your website because everybody knows you do that shit. Everyone is already aware. So it's like if you go make the 3 spec films with like your buddies in the summer, like a football thing, a coffee thing, a short documentary, if that's on the front page of your website and you start talking to people, that's the type of work they're going to bring you and consider you for, instead of trying to bring you another ski movie if you just had 6 ski movies on your website. So it's a lot just about perception and being strategic. And I wish the world wasn't that way, but just inherently it is, dude. We move fast. We move into digital culture. Someone's going to look at your shit for 3 seconds. So you better show them the type of stuff you want to be doing, not the stuff you necessarily have done for 10 years and you're great at. But if you're not trying to do more of it, like stop showing people it as much and show them the other stuff that you're really excited about, you know?
Yeah.
And I used to like that all the time. Like we have like, even on my personal website, it's like all the commercial brand shit that I want to do more of. And then I have another section that's like it's like a personal tab. That's like, hey, check out all my old shit, my passion projects and my ski shit, like stuff that I just did for fun or whatever, you know? So
Yeah.
it's not like you got to hide stuff away. It's more just being strategic about what the first thing someone sees is, because that's how they're going to perceive you. Again, for better or for worse. It's not like a great culture to live in, but it's just how the world works, you know?
Yeah. I mean, people see like 30,000 pieces of content a day, you know, so
Yeah,
you got to do
it's
some
out of
listings.
control. So
So
oversaturated. Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah. And so, I mean, we've been talking like from the perspective of you trying to make it, and not, and at this point, you're sitting on the other side of the table with like hiring people and viewing people's work to eventually pull them in. So when somebody's interviewing with you, like what's something either having to do with their work or who they are that stands out to you, like, oh yeah, I want this person part of my team, and then obviously we'll go into the inverse where it's like, well, I don't want anything to
Yeah.
do with this person.
I mean, if it's a creative role, obviously the work drives a lot of it to some degree. I'd say maybe like half of it. Maybe let's say it's 30% work that's attractive. Like, okay, this person really knows what they're doing. They can make cool shit, whether it's photo, video, or whatever. Next biggest thing would be personality. Because ultimately, like anyone we work with, we got to hang out with for 50, 60 hours a week. People want to work with people they like. And it doesn't matter what background they are, whether they're old, young, race, gender, that's irrelevant. It's more just like, is this someone I want to get in the trenches with and like spend time with? And like where the way we work is in really stressful, high pressure situations 24/7, juggling a bunch of shit. And you don't want to be in those situations with someone you're not going to want to like have a conversation with, or that is cool, or that's an asshole. So like our vetting system, a lot of steps is like what our gut tells us about someone's personality and like what their sort of like emotional and social intelligence is. Like how can they blend in with people? How can they befriend people? So like that's a huge part of it. And then the final sort of third that I try to figure out, which is tough where you work with someone, is just their ability to work hard. We live in such a competitive world, especially in the content space, that um, there's especially now, and I don't like to like think of people generationally differently. It sounds like my dad or a broken record, but like there's definitely certain people who are willing to fucking grind and get stuff done and elevate themselves. And then there's certain people who would prefer to just like phone it in and get by, and they hope that just like works out and manifests success. And it's like there's such a fundamental difference between those two approaches, and everyone around you can notice. And it might just take a week or two of working with them. You're like, oh God, that's one of like those people versus those people. And I've never met a business owner or a leader or a manager who doesn't appreciate people who are willing to fucking grind and put in the time and hours. And those people always end up getting the next opportunity or the cooler job or the bigger thing. Um, so I think everyone, I don't even think that's relevant to film and creative shit. I think that's just in general. Like people inherently like working with people who are willing to put in the time and work to get it done and support people and have each other's back and not disappear and not be flaky, and be on time. And I know this sounds like basic shit, but you'd be amazed at how many people we interface with every year who like don't understand those fundamentals that like are such a bigger component to relationships and work than you would tend to think, I guess. So yeah, those are sort of like the three factors I look at if someone's going to be like good. It's like the work is one, who they are as a person, and how do they interact with other people. More importantly, not that they're just a good person. Like, can you interact with a team and work together as a team? Then third, just the willingness to grind it out and like get shit done when times are tougher. You know?
Yeah, totally. Totally. All right, changing gears again, because
Yeah.
now we'll go back to this perspective of trying to make it. So you're doing the stuff for free, doing the favor. Hey, we work together through skiing. Let me do this, rowing thing for you. Let me do this
Yeah.
shoe thing for you. And so after you do it for free and you have that experience, and you prove yourself. How do you go about asking for money when you're first
Yes.
starting up and you don't have much experience?
Yeah. It's tough, man. And there's this veil around money that will never be lifted, no matter how long you work. It's like no one wants to tell you how much money they have to spend. No one, and eventually you sort of like, I don't know if there's a better way to describe it. It's like you sort of know your worth, and you're like, hey, I've just been doing shit for free. I'm really not going to be able to charge someone more like than $500 with a straight face, and 15, 20 years later, you might be asking someone for $5 million for something, like, but that evolution, like, I think for most creative roles, it's a tiptoe. It's like, what do you think your friends will pay you to start? Like, I know so many photographers who are like, I just charge $400 a day. I edit all the photos. And then after a couple of years of experience, like, well, no, I charge $1,000 a day and I charge for editing now. And then after another 3 years of experience, work for bigger brands, like, no, I charge $3,000 a day and I charge a lot to edit my photos, or you send it to someone else to get edited. And those things take time. Like, you just can't really jump up 3 tiers right away. People can read through it. They can look at your portfolio. They know you don't have the experience to warrant that amount of money. So like, I think it really is, there's no right answer, but it's about tiptoeing into it, starting super low so someone's willing to pay you. And then every job you do, just slowly creep up. And there's ceilings to certain things you can charge. But ultimately, like whatever that high end rate or compensation you want is, it's a bit of a path to get there. And jumping up too quickly is going to rub people the wrong way. So you really got to feel it out. And it is, again, learn how to deal with people, like reading the room a little bit and having that back and forth. Like, hey, how much do you think you want to spend on this? Or like, what do you think you can afford on this? And if they won't give you a number, ultimately you got to throw a number out. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to be like, do you think if you think they have like a grand or two, be like, what do you think? Like, you're thinking like 5,000 for this? And they're like, whoa, 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 no, no. And then all of a sudden, okay, if that number sounded big to them, they probably have more like 1,000, so you have to like sort of play this delicate dance. And this same dance happens on like massive multi-year contracts for like huge amounts of money. You're doing the same fucking thing as the photographer negotiating his like first headshots.
Yeah.
It's like the game never ends. Like no one is like, hey everybody, here's my money. Like sometimes that happens, but most of the time it's like this back and forth where it's sort of like an art to understand what someone's resources are, what you think you're worth, what you think they think you're worth. It's like this fucking dynamic dance, and there's no right way to do it. But I would always say, ask people candidly, like, hey, do you have a specific budget for this project? Or do you know what you were thinking about spending on this? Let them throw the first thing out. And then if they won't, you just got to take a stab at throwing out some number. And then you can see on the person's face immediately, they're either like, yeah, totally. Or like, holy fuck, I'm not paying that. So you got to have that like social awareness as you have those conversations. Just like read the room and then just negotiate in good faith and try to do something that they don't feel like they're getting taken for a spin, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I mean that's dealing with like clients and like kind of the brand, and then
Well, dude, that's the experience these kids are getting when like they're calling K2 and be like, can I get
yes,
another 5 grand for like the content to go travel to Japan for the like that skill set people are learning at like 18, 19, 20, 25. No one in school is getting that shit. I'll tell you that. And it's an art too. So like anyone who's done brand content or sponsorships has already played this game and sort of gets how it goes, you know?
yeah, totally. And even if you're just trying to get sponsored yourself, hey,
Yeah,
I'll wear your
100%.
goggles for the X amount of money, and that also plays into the you need to be good enough with people so you could confidentially ask your peers, like, yo, how much are you getting paid
Yeah.
for what you're doing?
I know. Do your research, man. It's like, well,
Yeah.
dude, I know K2 just paid that kid fucking 10 grand last year, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the same thing in film, like understanding what certain brands typically pay, like what they have been paying people. And if you have the community to like do some of your research, you can walk into those conversations more informed, and not sound like some crazy person.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Do you remember your early contracts? Like, do you remember the smallest amount you've been paid for a creative project?
Yeah, I remember at one it while we are still in Boulder, we had all these brands paying for our ski films, and it was like not a lot. Like every brand, we weren't like at the time, we were like the urban fucking delinquent kids. We weren't like Matchstick, who was raising real money from like Audi.
Yeah.
We were going to those small boutique brands we rode for, like I don't know, like Icelandic and even like K2, and like they weren't a huge global entity. Like so they would pay us I don't know, like a couple $1,000, $5,000 or something, like for the fucking year to like be involved with the film. So you collect a bunch of those brands, you get money together. No one paid ourselves. We just like use it for travel money to go around and shoot handrails. But then during that era, I think it was Solomon or somebody was like, yeah, can you go up to the Do Tour and film some stuff? We have like $1,500 for the day. And I was like, you're gonna pay us $1,500 for one fucking day? I was like living on like dorm food and shit. I thought I was rich. And now like looking back, that was probably like the smallest paid engagement we've done. But I remember at the time I was like through the fucking roof. Cause I was like, even ski sponsors were paying you like a couple of multiples of that for an entire year. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like on the small scale. So
Yeah.
that was like our first exposure to that brands like spend real money and like that now is like relatively nothing. I guess that was a while ago too, but like it's crazy what big brands have allocated to help support creative endeavors. And it's a cool space to play in because like as you unlock and peel back those layers, you realize that especially if it's a bigger global brand, they've allocated a lot of money to like do cool creative stuff. So if you can tap into that world, it's a fun space to play in.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, like most ski sponsorship contracts themselves are under like 10 grand for the year. So it's just
Yeah.
so
Which is nuts.
$1,500 for the day to shoot some stuff at Dew Tours. That's awesome for you. And
It
you're like,
seemed crazy to me at the time. Like, now looking back, it feels funny, but yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome, man. All right, fast forwarding to now. So you have a good relationship with these brands. At this point, does the work come to you, or are you still reaching out to brands, being like, "Hey, here's our body of work. We really want to work with you guys on X, Y, and Z." Like, how does that
That
relationship work now?
that is a very great question. The work never comes to you. As much as it does, you have to fight for it, especially now with how competitive it is. And yes, like all jokes aside, like yes, people do hit us up often, but I would say like a small percentage of our work just someone just calls with a bunch of money and gives it to us. Like that is so fucking rare these days. It's about like I've always said the path to success is being extremely proactive. It's like, can you get 30 coffees a month? And out of those, 4 people will follow up with you, and one of them may have a job. But if you're doing 3 intro meetings a month, you're not getting a single job in general. And some people are like, you meet 30 people a month. We meet like 6 to 10 people a day now.
Mm.
Like that's the volume of like outreach and stuff you do, whether you're an individual photographer or you're like a bigger agency production company, whatever it may be. It's different scales, right? It's relative. But at the same time, if you want to have success, you got to be proactive and go work for it. And yeah, there are the exceptions of like some guy who's some freak savant artist who just like the phone rings all the time. Of course, I'm saying for the vast majority of people or creators or like artists, you got to work for it. And I think I've watched a lot of friends sit around and wait for it to happen, and it's not happening unless you go out and do it. And it's like mining that Rolodex of every person you've met and begging them for FaceTime. And that's the other thing I would highly recommend, trying to avoid Zooms and phone calls and get someone to sit down. Because if you can get somebody for a lunch for an hour and they're stuck with you for that hour, they're inherently, you're going to make friends with them. And they're just like, okay, fuck, I know that kid. Like, yeah. And then a month later, they're going to have something like, oh, I'm going to call Charlie who I hung out with the other day. You know, like,
Yeah.
the Zoom and phone calls are great. It's just a whole different thing. It's just like if you actually get, which I know these days is rare because like everyone's all over the fucking world working remotely. It's like tough to do. I understand, but if you ever can, it makes a world of difference, and we've seen that time and time again for years now.
Yeah. And so when you talk about like trying to meet people, who or
Yeah,
like what position are they in that you're trying to like who are you trying to get in front of these days?
yeah. It's a complex question because we work with a lot of different groups, but maybe in the context of like if you were an up and coming filmmaker or photographer who wanted to do work with like let's say brands, for instance, like which is I think a starting place for a lot of people more so than like a TV network or a publisher or like all these different entities that happen to utilize these type of resources. Like if you're going to go after brands, you're really looking for anybody in the marketing department. And like at the top of that is maybe like a CMO that's 20 steps above where you want to go. But then you just start looking lower, right? Like who are the category managers? Who are their creative directors? Who are their producers? They have even lower level folks like the social media teams now. These big brands have budgets that they're allowed to spend. You know, it's like you go to the North Face and there's some guy who runs social who has money to pay for stuff, you know? So yeah, I'd say creatives, producers, coordinators, and social people in the marketing department. And a lot of this information you can find on the internet for free. If you're looking for new random people to reach out to, or use your network to say, hey, my buddy's sponsored by the North Face. Ask the team manager, do you know who like the marketing guy is? Like, would you send me an intro text or email or something? I'd love to send them my work or something like that. You do that 100 times a month for 1 year, you will be set. I can guarantee it.
Yeah, that's so sick. Um, so okay, yeah. So the path for someone with like an actual tangible skill set, um, like shooting video, photo,
Yep.
whatever. But say there's always the guy in the crew that's pulling it all together. And like, well, for the
Yep.
sake of the conversation, we'll call him the producer.
Yep.
What does the path look like for that? For someone that's used to bringing the brands and the money together,
Yeah.
but can't shoot anything. Like
That
what's the
person,
yeah? Go ahead.
ironically, will probably be the most well off of the entire fucking crew, 15 years of them. The producers and executive producers and people who manage the relationships and money always float to the top. It's just a different path. And to your point, like if someone in the crew is really good at logistics or relationships with brands or can just like talk the talk and like get shit done, if they want to keep doing stuff that you're looking at some sort of producing role. And the word producer is very vague, depending on what
So
industry you're
vague.
in. But
Yeah.
regardless, I know all types of story producers, line producers, executive producers, film and TV producers, or commercial producers. But in general, all those roles in varying degrees are usually about organization, connecting the dots, holding the relationships. And if you don't know where to start, I think the best place would be to go get an internship at a company that does work that you want to do. So for instance, like if someone, I think we do 9 internships a year, like three times a year or something. Like someone came and was like, I'm super strong logistically. I can coordinate really well. I can talk with clients. I want an internship, which is like whatever, like really low paid entry level positions. And you're a bit of like a gopher to start. You're getting copies and shit, but you're surrounded by people who are doing the job you want to do. And then if you're smart and just keep your ears open, within like 3 months, like, okay, I get this shit. I want to be that kid's job, the coordinator by the end of this year. And you talk to the manager, get hired that entry level position. Then the next year, you're a junior producer. And then 4 years later, you're like a producer with a dope staff salary. And your buddy who can shoot is like scrounging for freelance work. And it's like, oh, how the tables have turned. So
Yeah.
I think, as you mentioned, that it was like that those people may feel a little lost, but I would strongly encourage them that they're actually positioned very well. In addition to the people who are more creatively oriented, like there's sometimes almost an easier path on that front, honestly, to success. So I would not discourage those people and encourage them to, yeah, go try to get an entry level position in a company, be the hard worker, be the kid who wants to make friends with everybody. And very quickly, you're going to find a really fun career path. Because if that's the shit you like to do, that's a huge part of our industry, whether it's photo or video or any creative world. So
Yeah.
the future is bright.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the value of being a PA is so understated. Like being a PA intern, whatever you want to call it, but
Yeah.
like just have that ground level where you, and I always describe this like in like the broadcast TV world. Like as a PA, you learn to speak the language of every single department. You
Yep.
know, and that is so great because you're running up to the booth, you're interacting with audio, video, production, operations. Like you're
Yeah.
interacting with everyone because everyone needs a little bit of help here and there. And then from there, you can say, okay, damn, I'm really stoked about audio.
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow that path. So
And I love that notion because the PAs do get to see everything. You may walk in like, I don't want to be a cinematographer. Then you get on set and you're like, damn, I don't want to do that at all, what those guys are doing. Like, I want to go do what those guys are doing, in
yeah,
whatever other department.
yeah,
So I back that for sure. And PA work is for those who don't work in film, the easiest work to do. Walking to any production company, pay a couple $100 a day, and you're just pretty much running around doing random shit. And it's the
yeah,
best way to get exposed. It's the easiest work to get. So,
yeah.
um, yeah.
That's so sick. And yeah, I heard Keegan was doing an interview recently, and he said that he's been doing some PA work for you guys.
Oh yeah, dude, Keegan's killing it. He's working at the studio and then like going to jump off buildings in his free time. It's fucking crazy. I love it, dude. He's killing it. It's so fun to hang
Yeah,
with him here.
that's so sick. All right, let's see. I want to see if we can get some more good stuff before we run out of time. Um, when you started working in the commercial world at first, did you have any like missteps or mistakes that kind of maybe are obvious to you in hindsight that you would really caution people against now? Like just being like, hey, I've already been through this. Skip this step in the learning process so you don't have to put up the same shit I did.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's tough. I think it goes back to some of the stuff I was reading earlier, like just understanding that you work for clients and they don't work for you. Like I remember I just get frustrated, like fuck that guy, whatever. It's not like that. It's like this person's paying you money to do something you love to do. Like be flexible. It's like don't draw hard lines when you're getting going. Just be like, dude, I'm down for whatever. Or like, yeah, it's a shitty decision. We'll figure it out. Just like go with the flow. I think that's something you just don't want to like misstep on, because then you'll rub people the wrong way. And another thing I'd say is be proactive about building relationships. Like people like to work with people they know. No
Hmm.
one is calling 1-800-JOE to do a job they care about. Like, no, I'm gonna hit up my homie. And this doesn't change like later in life. It's like people still want to work with people they like. So just be really I wish I had earlier taken that more seriously, like keeping a spreadsheet of everybody I know just in a Google sheet, like what the roles are, what company. Like I lost so many contacts over the years because I wasn't as focused on it. And now I see some of those people and I'm like, oh shit, I used to know that person. It's been 10 years. It's like now it's just gone. It's like
Yeah.
being really diligent about your personal network, even if you're a freelancer, is it's just huge, man. You never know when people are going to come back around. And so many people in the ski industry end up in really cool places that like if you have met people through that world, do your best to like maintain those relationships, send them a note every once in a while, catalog them in writing in a sheet of like, here's 100 people I know, here's where they're working, and quarterly send them a note to catch up. And you never know when someone's going to have that dream job that they're going to hire you for. And I think I could have done better at that or in the early days.
Yeah. I forget where I read this at one point, but it was like all things being equal, someone would rather work with a friend, and all things being unequal, people would typically rather still work with a friend. Like
A
even if it's a
100%.
yeah, even
People
if
will
it's a
take a
worse deal.
shittier option if they're a homie.
Yeah, exactly. Um, all right, well, so we're getting close to your cutoff time. Let's
Yeah.
we'll just get into some of your favorite stuff. So, do you have a looking back on what you've done over the past 10 years? Do you have a favorite shoot you've worked on outside of skiing?
Wow, that's a tough one. Um, I think probably the Ford Bronco launch we did, just because one, I'm like, it was sort of full circle from being friends with Jimmy Chin from the North Face team, and it was right when we were starting to do film work together. So it was like just really rad to collaborate with him on a really big project. And also the Bronco launch was just like a huge moment for one of the biggest car manufacturers in the world. So be able to like be part of that, especially at the time, it was like 5 years ago, I was just getting into car shit that at the time felt like really fucking cool. There's been a bunch over the years, but that'd be one example. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, that's so sick. Um, I don't know if this one will ruffle some feathers, but in a good way. Because so, do you have a favorite client to work with?
Oh, wow. That is tough. It changes all the time.
Yeah.
I would just want to thank the legacy companies who've worked with us forever because it's really rare relationships last a long time. Like the family at Oakley and North Face, it's been decade long runs of like a lot of awesome work and people have turned over the years and stuff, but a lot of the same people around. So I'd say, um, we have tons of favorite clients, but in terms of like the people who've invested in us, like those are the people I love because they like took a risk on us and trusted us. So I would want to thank both of those brands. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so sick. So this will actually transition to something else, but as someone behind the camera yourself, like, do you have a favorite camera that you enjoy working with? Because I know we have some camera nerds listening.
Wow. That's a good one too. I'd say on the still photo side, I like my Hasselblad, like a medium format film camera. It's small, it's built like a rock. I've taken all over the world. And then on the video side, I like shooting our Bolex, 60 millimeter Bolex. I never travel anywhere internationally without a Bolex on me. I fucking love that thing. So, and it's the easiest 16 mil camera to shoot, no power, hand wind. If anyone wants to try shooting film or hasn't done it before, grab a Bolex. They're awesome. They're everywhere.
Yeah. I'm glad I wrote that down about the camera because I wanted to actually ask you about that. So the gear, obviously, if you want to manipulate images in a specific way, you need good gear. So how do you recommend people go about that at first? You know, like the investment and then like charging kit fees and all that. Like, because
Yeah.
I mean, equipment's such a big part of it. So how do you navigate that when you're first starting out?
Yeah, I would recommend, surprisingly, when you first start out, buy your own shit, and then once you get more successful, rent all your shit. Because you can buy entry level gear now that is so good. Like some of the smaller video bodies that like are 1/10 of what we used to pay for like a red that was $40,000 or something. Now for like 4 grand, you can get like one of the best, consumer video cameras in the world. It's a little different than like the cinema cameras we use, but like it's really helpful if you can just shoot whenever you want. So if you're starting out, you should own your own shit so that you can shoot anytime you want. So you can do stuff for free so you don't incur the costs. And then as you grow in your career and you become more established, the equipment becomes so much more expensive. Like a lot of the film package we're using are like over $500,000, to own this stuff. So like I would highly recommend not trying to own that shit and just rent it when you need it. The jobs will pay for it. But in the early days, or if you're a smaller brand, own your own gear, rent it to the client. You'll pay that shit off in no time. You'll end up making money off the gear while also being able to shoot whenever you want. So that's like high level perspective, but everyone's different. I know people who've invested in big film gear too and made money off it. So there's no right way to do it, but like holistically, I'd always try to own your own camera so you can work whenever you want, getting going for sure.
Yeah. And so how do you go about that? Because I've worked adjacent to the people that like are the photographers
Yeah.
and the videographers. How do you go about that with the brand, especially when you're first starting? Like, hey, I already own this,
Yeah.
so you'll need to pay X amount per day for me to use it in
Oh,
addition
yeah.
to my day rate.
Brands are used to that shit, man.
Yeah.
Like everyone should try to take a crash course on budgeting, whether they're freelance photographer or videographer, because you'd be amazed at what people don't bill clients for that they are perfectly happy to pay for.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it's your day rate, but then it's your equipment and it's your meals and it's your gas and it's whatever you could imagine, other kit fees. it can spiral, and you don't want to overwhelm your client. But ultimately, there's certain expenses that brands are used to paying for, and a lot of times it's not just your day rate, and equipment's one of the biggest things. And how much you should charge for your equipment, it just really depends on what you own. It's not like a percentage of the value. It's sort of like what the market rate is. What good recommendation would be go on a camera rental website like Sammy's Camera and be like, what is a 5D rent for? Or like, what is this rent for per day? And just charge the client the same rate.
Yeah, I it's so funny. I always caution people that at work especially like if you are spending any money to provide value to a company you're working for, you should highly, highly consider expensing it back to them.
Yeah.
Like, don't you really shouldn't be paying out of pocket for, I mean, I'm on the operations side, so like
Yeah.
I'm not paying for any craft for the crew or meals for the crew or
Yeah.
gas for rides that need to be like you gotta
And
be
I would
very careful.
suggest
Yeah.
if a client is $1,000 and you think you're worth $1,000, charge them 500 with 500 expenses and say, hey, you can only afford half my rate in this budget. So that next time you can help grow the number up. Instead
Yeah.
of just charging $1,000 for your rate and zero for any of your equipment or expenses, it's a bad look for the client. It discounts your worth too.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you guys do rentals too. Like that's a whole other avenue of
Dude,
revenue. Yeah.
we own a larger rental business now that Cam Riley manages and Keegan works for. Just
Yeah.
saying.
So this is so cool, man. All right.
Yeah.
What's your favorite location to shoot? Because I saw, I mean, I was just going through your feed that Wyoming tourism shoot you
Yeah.
guys did look so sick.
Yeah, I would have to just probably say Jackson Hole. Yeah, my whole family retired there from Boston, and then my brother lives up there. I have a house there now too. So I just love being able to shoot at home. We're actually shooting for Carhartt in Jackson this weekend. So it's like going on a shoot's really just like going to where my family is and going to hang in beautiful mountains. You know, the Tetons are the shit, man. It's a good part of the country.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad we could we hit the 5 o'clock Eastern time mark. So I don't want to
Yeah.
steal any more of your time. I'm glad we could wrap up with a family note. But yeah,
Oh,
thanks for
yeah.
being here. If anyone wants to work for you, how can they get in touch with you?
There's an email right on our website. I believe it's like jobs@stepstudios.com, but we got a big internship program. We're hiring people all the time. Hit us up, man, or have people just shoot me an email. I like try my very best to respond to everybody. Got really pissed off as a kid when no one would email me back. So now I have like a vengeance to get back to everybody. So feel free to hit me up. I'm around. If I can't help you personally, I can try to send you somewhere that can. And yeah, man, we've had a lot of fun ski kids come and intern and work for us over the years. So like come to LA for a summer when you're not skiing and come hang. And best of luck to everybody. And yeah, keep kicking ass out there, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, sick. Thank you very much, and I will chat with you soon.
Hell yeah, man.
Yep.
Peace.